My husband took his mistress on a cruise, but I was already there, with her fiancé. I discovered that my husband was going on a cruise with his lover, but when he arrived, I was already there with her fiancé. The message appeared on my screen at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was an email confirmation from Paradise Cruise Lines. It had not been sent to me directly. It had been forwarded by accident into our family cloud account, the same shared account my husband and I used for bills, travel documents, and photos from holidays that suddenly felt like they belonged to a stranger's life. A luxury suite, a champagne package, a couple's massage. Everything had been booked under my husband's name for the following week, the same week he had told me he would be away at an important business conference in Seattle. Except there was another name on the reservation, Vanessa. My hands did not tremble. My coffee did not spill. I did not scream or collapse or throw the phone across the room. Something inside me simply crystallized. 15 years of marriage snapped into focus with perfect and terrible clarity. I sat there and scrolled through the itinerary with a strange detachment, as if I were reading the schedule of two strangers. A 5-day Caribbean cruise, an ocean view balcony suite, a captain's table dinner, a romantic champagne package, a couple's massage. Every cliché possible, booked by a man who could not even remember which flowers I liked on our anniversary. An hour earlier, he had texted me, "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." I stared at that message, then back at the cruise details. Cabin 1243, deck 10, starboard side. There was something about those specific details that made it real in a way my anger had not yet allowed. This was not just an affair. This was planning, calculation, a parallel life being built carefully and comfortably while I maintained ours. What a fool I had been. I remember standing up and walking slowly to our bedroom closet, the one we had shared for years. His suits hung beside my dresses as if they still had the right to be there. His shoes lined up neatly beside mine, his belts, his cufflinks, the blue tie I had bought him for his last promotion, all sitting in their usual places. The physical closeness of our things suddenly felt obscene. I reached for one of his jackets. I wanted to pull everything down. I wanted to tear the fabric, snap the hangers, destroy every memory that had been stored in that closet under the false idea that we were still husband and wife. Then my phone chimed again. Another notification from the family cloud. A photo appeared on the screen. A woman, young and blonde, posing in front of a mirror in lingerie that still had price tags hanging from it. Perfect teeth, carefully styled hair. The kind of confidence that came from believing no one would ever see what she was doing. The caption read, "Can't wait for you to take this off on our trip. Counting the days." I recognized her immediately. Vanessa, the new customer service director at my husband's company. The one he had insisted on inviting to our Christmas party the previous December. The one who had stood in my home, accepted a glass of wine from my hand, and looked at me with something that I had not understood at the time. Now I knew what it was. Pity. She had looked at me with pity while sleeping with my husband. What stopped me from destroying his things was not restraint. It was a random memory, sharp and sudden. A conversation I had overheard at a charity gala 3 months earlier. Vanessa speaking loudly to a cluster of people near the bar, showing off a flashy diamond ring and talking about her upcoming June wedding. She had been laughing about wedding vendors, honeymoon ideas, guest lists, and how lucky she was to have found the one. I sat down on the edge of our bed, my phone still in my hand. Then I did something I had never done before. I searched her name on social media. Her profile was public. Of course it was. It was filled with hashtags about being blessed, chosen, adored, and becoming a future wife. Photo after photo showed her smiling beside the same man, leaning into him, holding up her ring, documenting a love story for everyone to applaud. And there he was, her fiancé, tagged in dozens of photos. Bradley, handsome in that polished Silicon Valley way. expensive haircut, confident smile, clean shirts, startup success stories, motivational quotes about discipline, vision, and building a meaningful life. His own profile was full of carefully curated success. Then, one recent post caught my attention. Heading on a solo trip before the wedding madness. Time to clear my head and come back ready to start forever with Vanessa. The dates matched exactly. The cruise dates. I stared at the post for a long time. Then a strange calm came over me. Not peace, not forgiveness. Something colder. The kind of calm that arrives when the universe hands you something so perfectly synchronized that it feels less like coincidence and more like instruction. I opened my laptop. I went to the Paradise Cruise Line's website. I pulled up the deck plans. Then I checked cabin availability. My credit card was already in my hand before I had fully admitted to myself what I was doing. 20 minutes later, I had my own confirmation email. A single cabin. Cabin 1245. Right next to their little love nest. The symmetry was too perfect to ignore. I took one deep breath, opened a new browser tab, found Bradley's business email through his company website, and wrote the only rational message a woman in my position could write. Mr. Bradley, I believe we have something important to discuss regarding our respective partners and their upcoming Caribbean cruise. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow? It concerns your fiancé Vanessa and my husband, who have made plans. I think you should know about. I attached the booking confirmation. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply waited, staring at the email thread, watching the little dots appear and disappear as he read my message. Typing. Stopping. Typing again. His response came 3 minutes later. Where and when? The next morning, I sat at a corner table in an upscale downtown cafe watching the door. I recognized him immediately. He was taller in person, with the confident stride of someone used to commanding rooms and being listened to. But when his eyes found mine across the cafe, the confidence cracked for a second. I saw recognition, understanding, and beneath it, the look of a person whose world had also started to shatter. He sat across from me. There was no handshake, no awkward introduction, no need for small talk. Show me everything, he said, quietly. So I did. I showed him the cruise confirmation, the cabin number, the dates, the champagne package, the couple's massage, the lingerie photo, the caption, the family cloud mistake that had revealed it all. By the time our coffees had gone cold, we had formed something between us. Not friendship, not yet. An alliance born of shared betrayal. No more than that. A pact. A strategy. They think they're so clever, I said, finally allowing myself a bitter smile. They have no idea what's coming. Bradley's expression hardened with resolve. What exactly did you have in mind? I leaned forward and lowered my voice. I already booked the cabin next to theirs. But one person watching their romantic getaway crumble isn't nearly as satisfying as two, don't you think? He leaned in too, his voice equally low. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting we both take that cruise, I said. I'm suggesting we become very, very good friends, who just happen to be everywhere they are. I'm suggesting we make this the vacation they'll never forget. For all the wrong reasons. For the first time since he had sat down, Bradley smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man imagining careful, precise, well-earned retribution. I'm in, he said, but we need to be smarter than them. We need a plan that doesn't just catch them, it needs to destroy whatever fantasy they've built. I nodded, feeling something like excitement beneath the anger. By the time we dock back in Miami, I said, they'll wish they never set foot on that ship. The week before the cruise became an Academy Award-worthy performance. I kissed my husband goodbye while he packed his conference clothes. I helped him choose a tie for his supposed presentation. I reminded him to take his charger. I even drove him to the airport, stopping in the departure lane with a smile plastered across my face. I'll miss you, he said, though his eyes did not quite meet mine. "Oh, I'm sure the time will fly," I replied. What he did not know was that swimsuits, evening dresses, and everything I needed for my own trip were already packed in a suitcase hidden at Bradley's temporary apartment. As soon as my husband's plane took off not to Seattle but to Miami, I drove straight to the port where Bradley was waiting. We had spent every day of the previous week planning. We coordinated details, we built a backstory. We would be old college friends who had reconnected by chance. We practiced our reactions for the moment we accidentally ran into our cheating partners. We memorized the ship's layout. We booked the same shore excursions they had scheduled. "How are you feeling?" Bradley asked as we checked in at the cruise terminal. His hand touched my shoulder briefly, a gesture that was gentle but steady. "I keep alternating between wanting to cry and wanting to push them both overboard," I admitted. He nodded solemnly. "I've already looked up maritime law. Unfortunately, that would be frowned upon." That flash of dark humor startled the laugh out of me. The first real laugh I had managed in days. It felt strange in my throat. We boarded separately and agreed to meet later after settling into our cabins. I found mine easily. 1245, right next to the room where my husband would soon be caressing his lover. I stood inside the cabin for a long moment, staring at the wall that separated my room from theirs. Then I pressed my ear against it. Empty. For now. Their flight would not arrive for a few more hours. I unpacked methodically. I hung dresses I had bought specifically for this cruise. Dresses my husband had never seen. Dresses chosen not for him, but for the version of myself who would face him. Elegant. Sharp. Unapologetic. At 6 p.m., Bradley texted me. "They've boarded. Just saw them at check-in. They didn't see me." My heart raced. My palms grew damp. The moment was coming faster than I had imagined. I met Bradley at a bar 3 decks up, far enough from their cabin that we would not run into them immediately. He already had a martini waiting for me. "To the most twisted vacation either of us has ever taken," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. "May we survive with our dignity, if not our marriages." "My marriage ended before it began, apparently," he said. His voice carried the same hollow quality I had felt in my own chest for days. We shared our stories, then filling in the blanks of our relationships. Bradley had met Vanessa at a tech conference 2 years earlier. They had gotten engaged quickly. Too quickly, he now realized. Looking back, he saw the signs clearly. Unexplained absences, secretive phone behavior, sudden work emergencies, emotional distance disguised as stress. I ignored it all he said, staring down into his drink. I wanted so badly to believe I had found the right person. 15 years, I said. I gave him 15 years. The words came out flat at first, then cracked. We talked about children. We decided together to focus on our careers first. We had a timeline. Next year was supposed to be our year to try. My voice broke unexpectedly. Bradley's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "Be angry." "I am." We spent hours talking. We drank enough to stay relaxed, but not enough to cloud our judgment. We needed to be sharp. Ready. Around 10 p.m., we ventured into the main dining room for the welcome dinner. And there they were, sitting at a table for 2 near the windows. My husband's hand rested on the small of Vanessa's back as they studied the menu together. Intimate. Comfortable. Practiced. The sight hit me harder than I expected. This was not their first trip together. This was not new. That realization made my knees buckle slightly. Bradley steadied me with a hand on my elbow. "Not yet," he whispered. "Let them think they got away with it. Tomorrow, we begin." We retreated to a different restaurant, but I could barely eat. My stomach had become a knot of acid and anger. "How long do you think this has been going on?" I asked, pushing pasta around my plate. "Does it matter?" Bradley asked. "A day? A month? A year?" They both betrayed us. "It matters to me," I said. I need to know how much of my life has been a lie. Back in my cabin that night, I pressed my ear to the wall again. This time, I heard them laughing, murmuring, the occasional creak of bed springs. I recorded everything, evidence for what was to come. I barely slept. When morning arrived, I met Bradley for breakfast on the Lido deck. We had already confirmed that our cheating partners had booked a snorkeling excursion at the first port of call, a small private island owned by the cruise line. "Ready for day one?" Bradley asked, sliding a coffee toward me. "As ready as I'll ever be." We took the tender to the island 30 minutes after my husband and Vanessa had left. We spotted them easily on the beach. They were sharing a lounge chair. Her head rested on his chest. His fingers moved lazily through her hair. I stood there for one brief second, watching my husband touch another woman with a tenderness I had spent years trying to earn back from him. Then I exhaled. Bradley and I set up our own chairs exactly in their line of sight, angled carefully so they would not notice us immediately. We waited. For recognition, for shock, for the first fracture. It came when my husband stood up to get drinks from the beach bar. He turned 2 frozen cocktails in his hands and froze mid-step when he saw me. The drinks tilted. Blue liquid splashed over his hands. I gave him a small wave, as casual as if we had run into each other at the grocery store. His face went pale so quickly I thought he might faint. He stood there paralyzed, unable to move toward me or back to Vanessa, who was still scrolling through her phone, oblivious. I adjusted my new swimsuit, a daring red one I would never have chosen before, and walked directly toward him. "What a coincidence," I said loud enough for nearby sunbathers to hear. "How lucky to run into you here. The weather looks different than I remembered from Seattle." He opened and closed his mouth. No sound came out. Over his shoulder, I saw Vanessa look up. First confusion crossed her face, then horror as she spotted Bradley approaching behind me. "What?" How my husband finally managed. "Your lover should be more careful about sharing your itinerary on the family cloud account," I said pleasantly. "Oh, and you should meet my friend Bradley. I think he already knows your girlfriend." I turned toward Vanessa, whose face had turned the color of sour milk. "That engagement ring looks beautiful in the sunlight," I said. "Does your fiancé know you're engaged? Or is that just a detail you overlooked while planning your romantic getaway?" People were watching us now. Not discreetly, openly. Sunbathers, couples, families, a bartender wiping the same glass much too slowly. The drama unfolded there on perfect white sand with turquoise water shining behind us like a travel advertisement for betrayal. "This isn't what it looks like," my husband finally said. The most cliched phrase possible. "Really?" I looked pointedly at the 2 blue drinks in his hands, then at Vanessa's shocked face, then back at him. "Because it looks exactly like you're on a cruise with your lover while telling your wife you're at a business conference in Seattle." Bradley stepped forward and addressed Vanessa directly. "We've booked all the same shore excursions as you," he said. "Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? We'll have lots of quality time together on this trip." And that was only the beginning. The first day of 5. The foundation of what would become the most unbearable vacation imaginable for 2 people who thought they had gotten away with betrayal. Standing there looking at my husband, I understood something with a clarity that almost hurt. I had given that man everything. My youth, my trust, my support through career changes, family losses, long nights, difficult years, and all the quiet compromises that no one sees from the outside of a marriage. I had believed we were building something meaningful together. All the while, he had been building a separate life, a life that did not include me. I gave them one last smile. "Enjoy your drinks," I said. "The cruise is just beginning." That night, Bradley and I regrouped in my cabin. We analyzed the day's confrontation and fine-tuned our strategy for the days ahead. The initial shock had been satisfying, but it was not enough. Nowhere near enough for the depth of what they had done. "They're rattled," Bradley observed, pacing the narrow space of my cabin. I intercepted Vanessa, trying to change their dinner reservations and shore excursions. I nodded, scrolling through the ship's app on my tablet. "They won't get far." I've befriended 3 crew members who keep me updated on any changes they try to make. This was no longer a spontaneous reaction. During our planning week, I had become methodical in ways I never knew I could be. What my husband did not know was that before I left home, I had photographed his office documents. I had downloaded his text message history through our phone plan's backup service. I had contacted our bank and flagged large expenses from the past year, creating a clean timeline of his affair through hotel charges, travel upgrades, restaurant bills, and gift purchases. What Vanessa did not know was that Bradley had been just as thorough. He had gathered screenshots of suspicious messages. He had tracked her location history. And most damaging of all, he had documented how she had been diverting funds from their startup's investors to finance luxury purchases. Tomorrow is the formal dinner, I said, studying the schedule. They'll expect us to make a scene. Bradley stopped pacing. So we don't. Exactly. I smiled, feeling a cold clarity settle into place. We'll do the opposite. We'll be charming, friendly even. We'll invite them to join our table. We'll talk casually about psychological warfare. Bradley nodded with appreciation. The anticipation of confrontation is often worse than the confrontation itself. I walked to my suitcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. I've been saving this for the right moment, I said. Now I think I know when to use it. Inside were photos. Security camera images from the ship showing my husband and Vanessa on previous cruises. Dates. Timestamps. Proof of a pattern going back 18 months. The head of security had been surprisingly helpful after I explained my situation and offered a generous consulting fee. Bradley stared at the images, visibly impressed. How did you get these? Let's just say when your husband brags about always booking the same cruise line for business trips, he creates a traceable pattern. I laid the photos out chronologically on the bed. 8 cruises in 18 months. Always with her. Always during what he had told me were conferences, client meetings, or business retreats. Bradley gave a low whistle. That's not a romance. That's a second relationship. Exactly, I said. And tomorrow night, I want both of them to understand that we know everything, not just this cruise. Everything. We stayed up past midnight planning every interaction, every casual encounter, every precise moment for the remaining days. We were no longer improvising. This was choreographed retribution. The next morning brought another shore excursion, a tour of ancient ruins at the first port of call. As planned, Bradley and I arrived just as my husband and Vanessa were boarding the tour bus. The color drained from their faces when they saw us. I smiled brightly and took the seat directly behind them. Good morning, I said. Sleep well? Vanessa stared straight ahead, rigid with tension. My husband attempted a weak smile. Look, we can talk privately. Oh, we'll have plenty of time to talk, I assured him. We have 3 more days together on this lovely ship. No rush. During the tour, Bradley and I maintained pleasant conversation. We pointed out the scenery, we listened to the guide, we occasionally directed innocent questions toward our uncomfortable companions. Have you visited these ruins before? Isn't the architecture fascinating? What do you think of the preservation work? Each normal interaction made them more nervous than a direct confrontation would have. By the time we returned to the ship, they were visibly unraveling. They whispered tensely to each other. They looked over their shoulders. They jumped at every corner where they spotted us. That night for the formal dinner, I wore a black dress I had bought specifically for the cruise. Elegant. Understated. With just enough edge to make a statement. Bradley wore a tailored suit that highlighted all the advantages of his athletic build. We entered the dining room deliberately 15 minutes after my husband and Vanessa had already been seated. May we join you? I asked, already pulling out a chair at their table for 2. The maitre d' mentioned you had room. My husband could not refuse without creating a scene. Trapped by social convention, they shifted uncomfortably as we settled in. Wonderful evening, isn't it? Bradley began unfolding his napkin with practiced ease. Vanessa, that dress looks familiar. Didn't you wear it to the Henderson Charity Gala last month? Her eyes widened slightly. The Henderson Gala had been a work event. One where she had introduced my husband as her colleague. Yes, she stammered. I think so. I flagged down a waiter. Champagne for the table, please. We're celebrating. My husband's expression darkened. What exactly are we celebrating? I smiled, reached into my purse, and pulled out the envelope of photos. Anniversaries, I said. Specifically, the 18-month anniversary of your first cruise together. Then I placed the photos on the table one by one like dealing cards. Caribbean March last year. Mediterranean May. Alaska July. Each one during what you told me were business trips. The blood drained from his face. How did you? I've always admired your consistency. I continued, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. Same cruise line, often the same cabin category. It made tracking surprisingly easy. Vanessa's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Bradley chose that moment to make his contribution. Speaking of consistency, he said, sliding a folder across the table toward Vanessa, I've been reviewing our company's finances. There's an interesting pattern of withdrawals that coincides with the dates of these cruises. Her glass froze halfway to her lips. That's not you can't prove. Our investors were quite interested in the documentation, Bradley continued calmly. I had a fascinating call with them yesterday. This was the moment I had prepared for. The moment when their understanding shifted. We were not just angry partners lashing out. We had been methodical, patient. And we had receipts, literally and figuratively. What do you want? My husband finally asked, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the dining room. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. For tonight, just dinner, pleasant conversation. Maybe you could tell Bradley about your conference schedule for the next few months. I'm sure he'd be interested to know which business trips are actually romantic getaways. They sat, frozen, trapped by their own web of lies. When the waiter arrived with champagne, I raised my glass. To truth, I said. It always surfaces eventually. During dinner, Bradley and I remained cordial. We discussed travel, food, the entertainment schedule, and every so often we dropped another detail that confirmed just how thoroughly we had investigated their affair. Each revelation was a precise incision, small enough to seem polite, sharp enough to draw blood. By dessert, they both looked physically ill. When Bradley and I finally stood to leave, I placed a room key card on the table. For your convenience, I explained, it's for the cabin adjacent to yours. We've been taking turns listening through the wall. The soundproofing is surprisingly poor. My husband's face twisted as he understood that even their most intimate moments had been compromised. As Bradley and I walked away, he leaned close and whispered, "That was masterful. But that's just the beginning, isn't it?" I nodded. I did not feel joy. I felt cold satisfaction. Tomorrow we move to phase 2, I said. Tonight was about showing them we know everything. Tomorrow is about showing them what that knowledge will cost them. Back in my cabin, I finally allowed myself a moment of genuine grief. Not for my husband, exactly. For the life I had believed in. 15 years lost. Trust shattered. Future plans evaporated. The child we had discussed, the house we had improved together, the retirement trips we had talked about on quiet Sunday mornings, all of it collapsed into something I could no longer recognize. But in the empty space it left behind, something unexpected had begun to rise. A sense of my own power. I had been blindsided by betrayal, but I had not responded with helpless heartbreak. I had responded with action. Calculated action. I sent one final text to Bradley before sleep. Thank you for today. Tomorrow, we show no mercy. His response came almost immediately. They created this situation. We're just making sure they experience the consequences they deserve. I fell asleep to the muffled sound of an argument through the wall. A lullaby of justice beginning to unfold. The third day of the cruise dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for what Bradley and I had planned. While my husband and Vanessa had spent the night arguing, we had been finalizing details with crew members and other passengers we had carefully recruited to our cause. Our first encounter came at breakfast. We saw them at a corner table, hunched over coffee, looking exhausted and tense. Instead of approaching them, Bradley and I sat prominently in the center of the dining room, laughing and chatting with a group of passengers we had befriended. Specifically, two couples who, by extraordinary luck and strategic conversation, turned out to be from my husband's industry. As we passed my husband's table later, I gestured cheerfully toward our new friends. "Rachel and Diana are from Westbrook Partners," I said. "Apparently, they've been trying to reach your company about that merger proposal. What a coincidence finding them here." My husband's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Westbrook Partners was indeed a major potential client his company had been courting for months. And now they were learning about his business conference while he sat beside his lover on a Caribbean cruise. "We're having drinks with them later," Bradley added cheerfully. "You should join us. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your professional commitments." Neither of them responded. They did not need to. The message was clear. Their private affair was becoming increasingly public, and professional consequences were no longer theoretical. By noon, we had implemented the next phase. My husband and Vanessa had scheduled a couples massage at the ship's spa. When they arrived, they discovered their appointment had been accidentally changed to separate treatments in different rooms. Meanwhile, Bradley and I enjoyed their original time slot, having befriended the spa manager with a generous tip and a convincing story about anniversary celebrations. Small disruptions continued throughout the day. Their lunch reservation mysteriously disappeared. Their shore excursion was suddenly overbooked. Their special requests were lost in the system. Nothing dramatic enough to prove sabotage, just a steady stream of inconveniences that slowly undermined the romantic getaway they had worked so hard to create. But the real turning point came that evening. The ship's program included a passenger talent show, followed by a dance contest. Bradley and I had signed up. We had also entered my husband and Vanessa's names without their knowledge. Our next contestants, the cruise director announced to the packed lounge, "Join us, celebrating a very special occasion. Let's welcome David and Vanessa." A spotlight swung to their table. They sat frozen in horror as their names were called. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. "We've heard they're celebrating a special relationship anniversary," the cruise director continued reading from the card I had submitted. 18 months of relationship bliss. Although I'm also hearing congratulations are in order for Vanessa's engagement. Wait, that can't be right. Confused murmurs spread through the audience. My husband and Vanessa remained glued to their seats, humiliation visible on their faces. "Maybe they're feeling shy," Bradley called from our table. Then I stood. "Maybe they'd feel more comfortable if we showed everyone photos of their celebration first." Before they could react, the large screen behind the stage lit up. Security camera images from their previous cruises appeared one after another, interspersed with screenshots of text messages between them planning their rendezvous. I had carefully edited out anything too explicit. I did not need to show everything. I only needed to leave enough context for the audience to understand. And they understood quickly. "That's not, we didn't authorize," my husband stammered, finally finding his voice as he stood. "Oh, one more special photo," I announced, nodding to the AV technician I had befriended. The screen changed. Now it showed Vanessa's engagement announcement post, complete with her radiant smile beside Bradley and her massive ring displayed proudly to the camera. The date stamp was unmistakable. 6 months into her affair with my husband. The room went silent. Then came the whispers, the sideways glances, the judgment. They had avoided this for months by conducting their affair on anonymous cruises where no one knew them. Now an entire lounge full of strangers knew exactly who they were. "I think that's our cue," Bradley said, standing and offering me his hand. "We should show them how it's done." We took the dance floor for the competition and performed a tango we had practiced during our planning week. Every dramatic turn, every precise step, every dip, everything was executed with controlled intensity, our eyes meeting in a performance of connection that drew enthusiastic applause from the room. When we finished, I saw my husband and Vanessa slipping out of the lounge, heads down. unable to face the room of strangers who now knew their secret. Bradley and I followed at a distance. We watched them argue in a secluded corner of the deck. Their body language told the story. Accusations, denials, recriminations, each of them suddenly desperate to separate themselves from the consequences of something they had built together. "They're imploding," Bradley observed quietly. "Good," I replied. The satisfaction ran deeper than I had expected. But we're not finished yet. That night, we implemented the final stage of our ship-based plan. While my husband and Vanessa were in damage control mode after the public humiliation, I arranged for the ship's photography team to deliver something special to their cabin, a commemorative album. We had created it through the ship's photo service. Inside were professional photos taken throughout the cruise, candid shots of their arguments, their tense body language, their obvious discomfort as Bradley and I appeared in frame after frame. The photographers had been generously compensated to capture those moments discreetly. The album's title was engraved in elegant script, "When Truth Surfaced, A Journey of Discovery." Bradley and I stood in the hallway at a careful distance as a steward delivered the package. Through the crack of their door, I caught a glimpse of my husband's face when he opened it. First, confusion, then recognition, then the unmistakable descent into defeat. But the real culmination came the next morning as the ship prepared to dock at our final port of call. Bradley and I had arranged for a special announcement over the ship's PA system. "Attention passengers. David and Vanessa, could you please report to the purser's office regarding an urgent matter with your disembarkation documents?" When they arrived, visibly anxious, they found not just the purser, but also a representative from the cruise line's corporate office who happened to be aboard. Another fortunate connection we had made. "Mr. David, Miss Vanessa," the representative began formally. "It has come to our attention that you may have used fraudulent information when booking this cruise." My husband frowned. "What are you talking about? Your booking indicates this trip was reserved through your company as a business expense with tax documentation filed accordingly. However, the nature of your stay appears to be personal rather than professional." Vanessa paled. "That's not, we didn't." Furthermore, the representative continued, "There is the matter of company credit cards being used for non-business expenses, which has been flagged by your company's compliance department." Bradley and I watched from a discreet distance as my husband's professional world began collapsing in real time. The evidence I had gathered, including email exchanges I had forwarded to his company's ethics hotline, had triggered an internal investigation. Meanwhile, Vanessa received her own devastating news. Her access to their startup's financial accounts had been frozen pending an investor-directed audit. Bradley had moved quickly. Her financial manipulations were now under scrutiny. As they stood there, watching their carefully constructed parallel lives disintegrate around them, I felt a strange elation. Not happiness, not exactly vindication. Something deeper, a sense of justice. "This isn't just about the betrayal," I said quietly to Bradley as we watched from afar. "It's about the calculation, the premeditation, the years of lies." He nodded. "They thought they were too smart to get caught, too arrogant to face consequences." "Do you regret anything?" I asked, suddenly curious about what he felt now that our plan was nearing its end. Bradley considered the question. "I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it," he said. "I regret not seeing the signs earlier. But this," he gestured toward the scene unfolding before us, "this I don't regret at all." When my husband and Vanessa emerged from the purser's office, their faces were ashen, with the understanding that their actions had real-world consequences beyond their romantic entanglement. I stepped into their path. "Enjoy the cruise?" I asked. My voice was steady and clear. My husband looked at me with new eyes. Not anger, not defiance. Fear. Fear of what else I knew. Fear of what else I might have done. "This is just the beginning," I told him quietly. "When we dock tomorrow, you'll find your belongings packed and waiting at a hotel. The locks have been changed. Divorce papers are with my lawyer. Every member of our family and social circle has received a detailed account of how and why our marriage ended." Then I turned to Vanessa. "As for you, I wonder if your wedding vendors will refund your deposits. Bradley tells me he's been quite thorough in his communications with them. She flinched as if I had slapped her. The thing about betrayal, I continued addressing both of them, is that it shows who people really are. You both showed me exactly who you are. I'm just making sure everyone else sees it too. With that, Bradley and I walked away. We left them standing there in shock, surrounded by the wreckage of their own choices. That night, our final night on the ship, Bradley and I dined at the captain's table. The reservation originally made for my husband and Vanessa had been transferred to us through the connections we had cultivated. To new beginnings, Bradley said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. And to truth, I said, no matter how painful, it always sets you free. 6 months after that fateful cruise, I stood on a different deck. This one belonged to my new waterfront condo. The ocean stretched before me, infinite and uncertain, like my future. But for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt exhilarating instead of terrifying. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed. My husband, faced with the mountain of evidence I had gathered and the professional embarrassment already unfolding, did not contest any of my terms. His affair cost him more than his marriage. The ethics investigation at his company resulted in a demotion and professional censure. The cruise line also banned him from future bookings after determining that he had indeed committed fraud with his business expense claims. As for Vanessa, her story unraveled even more dramatically. The financial irregularities Bradley had uncovered were just the tip of the iceberg. Once investors began looking closely at their startup's books, they found a pattern of embezzlement that led to criminal charges. Her wedding, needless to say, never happened. The canceled vendor contracts and non-refundable deposits created a financial burden that only compounded her legal troubles. I sipped my morning coffee and watched seagulls wheel against the clear blue sky. Then my phone chimed. A text from Bradley. Just landed. Still on for lunch. Our relationship had evolved in unexpected ways since the cruise. Not romantically. We were both too scarred for that leap. But it had become something equally valuable. A genuine friendship forged in the crucible of shared betrayal and recovery. We had stayed in contact through the aftermath, supporting each other through divorce proceedings, legal complications, and the emotional turbulence of rebuilding our lives. He had relocated to open a new office of his now thriving company in my coastal city. A business decision that had happened to coincide with my own relocation after the divorce. See you at the Pier restaurant at 1, I texted back. As I prepared for lunch, I thought about how differently things had turned out from what either of us expected when we boarded that cruise 6 months earlier. We had been consumed by anger and betrayal. Neither of us had imagined emerging stronger. Neither of us had imagined finding a real connection with each other. The Pier restaurant was busy when I arrived, but Bradley had already secured our usual table on the patio. He stood when he saw me, his smile genuine. The Tokyo deal closed, he announced as I sat down. The investors are thrilled. Congratulations, I said, raising my water glass in a mock toast. Not bad for someone whose fiancé tried to sink his company. He laughed. It was a sound that had become more frequent as the months passed. Speaking of sinking, he said, have you heard anything about our favorite couple? I shook my head. Not directly, but Caroline mentioned seeing David at a conference last month. Apparently he's lost weight and looks haunted. Caroline, my former neighbor, had stayed firmly in my corner during the divorce. Vanessa's plea agreement was finalized, Bradley said. Probation, restitution, and community service. Her parents had to mortgage their house for her legal fees. We exchanged these updates without malice. That surprised me at first. For months, I had thought revenge would be the thing that satisfied me most. But now hearing about them no longer lit a fire inside me. Satisfaction had faded into something far more valuable. Indifference. Our meal arrived and the conversation shifted to our current lives. My new consulting business. His expansion plans. The charity gala we would both attend the following weekend. After dessert, Bradley grew thoughtful. I've been meaning to ask, he said. That cruise line sent me a promotional email yesterday. Caribbean itinerary. Special offer for holiday travel. I raised an eyebrow. Planning another revenge cruise so soon? Actually, he said, his expression turning serious. I was thinking about reclaiming the experience. A trip with no agenda, no manipulation, just enjoyment. That sounds good, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Would you consider coming? He asked quickly. As friends? I think we both deserve to experience a cruise that isn't organized around someone else's betrayal. I considered the offer, this unexpected invitation to revisit the place where our strange alliance had begun. 6 months earlier, I would have recoiled at the idea. Now I found myself nodding. I'd like that, I said simply. After lunch, we walked along the waterfront. The sun was warm, the harbor busy, the air alive with salt and movement. As we paused to watch sailboats glide across the water, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. The cruise that was meant to expose betrayal had accidentally revealed something else entirely: my own resilience. I had survived not just my husband's infidelity, but the collapse of a future I had believed in completely. You know what I said. Bradley looked at me. What? Sometimes I almost want to thank them. He looked surprised. Thank them for what? For forcing me to become someone stronger than I ever knew I could be. For accidentally introducing me to a true friend. I gestured between us. Their betrayal was painful. But what came after? I wouldn't change it for anything. Bradley nodded slowly. I've had the same thought he said. If Vanessa hadn't cheated, I'd be married to someone who was willing to steal from our company and lie to my face every day. Instead, I'm here rebuilding something authentic. The sun gleamed across the water, casting everything in gold. In that moment, I understood the most unexpected outcome of all. True closure does not come from revenge, no matter how satisfying revenge might feel in the moment. True closure comes from building something new from the wreckage. Something not. Something real. Bradley checked his watch. I should head back for my conference call, he said. But about that cruise, winter vacation, New Year's itinerary, I smiled. The lightness I felt would once have seemed impossible. New Year sounds perfect, I said. An appropriate way to start the next chapter. When we said goodbye, I took one last look at the ocean, the same ocean we had sailed across during that fateful cruise. The water that had carried us through betrayal now stretched before me as a symbol of possibility. The horizon was open. The future was unwritten. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what came next.